These are the creepiest Halloween horror stories you will ever hear. If you enjoy having chills up your spine, the suspense in these scary stories will do just that. Like many of my friends, I used to think that Halloween was my favorite holiday because you could dress up as your favorite character and go around collecting free candy. That all changed when I was only 11 years old, and I started to love Halloween more for the movies than for the social aspect of it. See, back when I was growing up, the town I lived in had a local orchard and pumpkin patch that would hold a festival in October that would last the back half of the month. The best part of the festival was, of course, the last day of October, Halloween. That night, everyone wore costumes, and the orchard would run special sales and give out some free hot cider. It was by far the most festive time of the year. There were hay rides, games, pumpkin picking, and even a haunted corn maze. Honestly, this was probably the most fun that my town had every year. That year, I dressed as Leon from Resident Evil 4, and I couldn't have been happier with my costume. When my family and I got to the orchard, we all split up. My mom took my older two brothers and me to the games to play for a while, and my dad went with my little sister to check out the petting zoo. We were supposed to regroup in time for the hayride, but before that, it was essentially a free-for-all. I was in awe as I strode around and saw all the costumes that people were wearing. Some of them, like those of the Flash and other superheroes, were quite cool, while others were generally spooky and I tried to avoid them. Honestly though, those weren't the scariest parts that night for me. You see, it all started when we were playing the festival games. We started the booth where you just throw a ball to down some plastic pins stacked together. It was my brother's turn to play, so I was basically just spending my time looking around at the different people and seeing if I could recognize anyone. That was when I first noticed him. He was an adult who was standing on the other side of the walkway near the restrooms, wearing a Michael Myers mask, and for some reason, it felt like he was staring right at me. I tried to point him out to my mother, but when she looked over, she told me that he was probably just waiting for his kids to come out of the bathroom. That explanation seemed logical to me, so I stopped paying attention to him and continued enjoying the fair. After about 20 minutes of playing games, we finally met up with my dad and sister so that we could board the hayride before it got too crowded. We still had to wait in line, but it was only for about 5 minutes, and sure enough, we all piled onto a large carriage that was filled with hay bales to sit on and be pulled by a big tractor. The hayride was typically about 20 minutes long. It was a lot of fun because they would deploy costume employees throughout the route that the ride would travel. And it worked because at least 3 times throughout the journey, I eventually felt afraid. By the time it was done, my heart was definitely racing, and after that, there was only one thing left for me and my brothers to do: the haunted corn maze. We told our parents we wanted to do it before we left, and they reluctantly agreed because my sister was getting tired and they wanted to go home. However, we eventually succeeded in persuading them, and my dad instructed us to go straight to the car after we finished so they would be waiting for us there. As soon as we were given the all clear, we sprinted towards the corn maze. At this point, however, the maze was crowded, and it was difficult to keep track of where we were and who was who as we tried to make our way through it. I assumed everything would be fine, but little did I know, I was putting myself in a very dangerous situation. As I made my way through the maze, I eventually came to a dead end. When I turned around, I discovered I had lost track of my 2 brothers. As if that wasn't enough to make me panic, as I searched through the dense maze, I realized that I was once again being watched. When I turned around and glanced back through the maze, I observed that the same adult wearing the Michael Myers costume was staring at me directly. I turned around and ran away as the man appeared to be advancing towards me. As I struggled to find my way through the maze, I kept checking behind me and noticed that the man was moving faster and faster, almost as if he was coming for me. This made me panic. I unintentionally ran into someone just as I was ready to start freaking out. After running into this older woman, she asked me if I was okay. I was too terrified to respond, and I'm pretty sure she knew it. She didn't promise to help me find my family, and for some reason, I trusted her. She assisted me in exiting the maze, where I found my brothers waiting for me. When I told them what had happened, they assumed I had simply freaked out. We three went to our dad's car ready to drive home. But as we were leaving the parking lot, I couldn't help but turn around. And to my surprise, I saw the man wearing the Michael Myers mask standing in the entranceway, seemingly searching the parking lot for me. Things became even wilder when I understood how close I had come to being abducted the following day, when it was widely reported that a child had vanished from the Halloween festival. I told my parents what had happened to me, and together we gave the police a statement. But as far as I know, neither the kidnapper nor the child have ever been located. Before we move on to the next story, here's something you might not know about the easily recognizable pale-faced Michael Myers mask. Unquestionably, that is one terrifying face from the timeless 1978 horror film Halloween that has consistently frightened viewers in slasher flicks. The movie was shot on a small budget, and the crew actually used the cheapest mask they could locate, a $2 Star Trek Captain James T. Kirk mask. They changed the form of the eye holes and painted it white with spray paint, giving the Canadian William Shatner a horrifying appearance. This occurred October 31st, 2008, when I was 14 years old. I recall eagerly looking forward to Halloween. Since it was a Friday, we were able to remain out longer than normal. After trick-or-treating, my friend Matthew and I were going to return to my place for a sleepover. My father, a security guard who worked night shift, was going to be gone from sundown to sunup, allowing Matthew and I to do our own thing. When Matthew showed up around 7 o'clock, we quickly put on some inexpensive costumes and went out. Trick-or-treating in our neighborhood was always the worst because we were forced to walk a good quarter mile between each door because we lived in a forested area. However, I think the residents were aware of this because they would frequently give out more candy to make up for it. Of course, as we passed houses, we would spot other trick-or-treaters, though not as many as you might expect given the lack of that many young children in the neighborhood. After about 2 hours of trick-or-treating, I noticed someone following us. It was either a grown man or a really tall child, and I couldn't tell if he was wearing a Michael Myers mask. At first, I assumed he was trick-or-treating like everyone else, but he had no bag to carry candy, and it wasn't like he was with his kid or anything. I told Matthew about it, but he wasn't too worried and wanted to keep going. He suggested that if the person kept following us, we could turn around and continue hitting houses. But the guy did follow us, and I noticed pretty quickly that he wasn't even approaching the front doors of the houses to grab candy. Instead, he had lingered behind us once more. After telling Matthew this time, I could see he was feeling a little tenser. There was a shortcut through the woods that led straight to my house, and we took it sprinting as soon as we entered the woods. We didn't know if we were being watched, but in any case, we started locking all the doors and windows. When I heard Matthew screaming below, I was upstairs closing my bedroom window. I rushed down to meet him as he was standing next to the living room window. When I questioned him about what was wrong, he didn't respond and instead pointed out the window. Squinting, I followed his finger as my eyes grew accustomed to the darkness. When Matthew told me that the man wearing the Michael Myers mask was standing outside, I initially believed he was attempting to frighten me. However, when I turned around, I realized that he was actually standing deep inside a forest, partially hidden by a tree. I remained still and walked to the kitchen to get the phone. When my father answered the phone as I returned to the window, I informed him that there was a stranger outside wearing a Michael Myers mask. I informed him as I peered out the window that the man was creepy, just standing out there and watching the house. He said that he was probably only watching the home to terrify you, so make sure all the doors are secured and ignore the man. This was not the response I was hoping for, but I felt perhaps he was correct. Matthew and I tried to forget about it when we got to my room upstairs, but it was pretty much all we could think about. We started to come up with a plausible justification, but this was cut short by the sound of breaking glass downstairs. My breathing became rapid, and neither of us knew what to do because the phone was downstairs. After turning out the light, we entered the closet. We moved to the back and hid behind some clothes out of view. The 5 minutes that followed were entirely silent. Then, footsteps. Someone was in the room. They began to move around. pulse was pounding. Then the closet door slowly opened. There had to have been a full minute of nothing but silence until Matthew broke the silence by screaming. He was pulled from the closet right beside me. I stepped out and, confirming my fears, it was the man wearing a Michael Myers mask. Now he has a knife. Oh dear God, I don't want to die. He was now wrestling Matthew to the ground, and in seconds he had him pinned down. Fortunately, during the struggle, he dropped his knife. I seized the weapon and stabbed him in the back of the leg. He screamed in anguish as he landed on his side. As soon as Matthew stood up, we dashed outside. We ran outside to my neighbor's house, knocked on the door till they opened, described the situation, and were allowed inside while they contacted the police. To cut a long tale short, the cops were unable to locate the man since he had already left the house when they arrived. All that was left of the encounter was a smashed window and a missing kitchen knife. They searched for a blood trail but were unsuccessful. I was unharmed, but Matthew wasn't that fortunate. As he struggled with the man, he slashed his arm. I continue to think about that dreadful night even today. Before we move on to the next story, would you be kind enough to help us grow? Please hit the subscribe button and bell next to it so you never miss any new videos. I was 17 when this bizarre event occurred. My final Halloween before leaving for college. It was Halloween in our tranquil town, where nothing bad ever occurs. Although our house, which is in the wealthier part of town, would be described as gorgeous by anyone who isn't from the area, the real eye-catcher is our next-door neighbor's house. They always go overboard with their decorations for any occasion, but especially for Halloween and Christmas. This year was no different. Decorations were already out by October 1st. Some houses chose to go the cute and innocently creepy route with smiling ghosts and blow-up decorations. But our neighbors go the authentically spooky route, with the fake graves, fake bloody body bags, truly spooky-looking fake corpses, etc. This actually attracts a lot of attention and makes it usual to see cars sitting in front of their house in the middle of the street as people are driving by and filming. To avoid blowing up their spot even more, I'll rename my neighbors Mike and Donna. Fast forward to Halloween Day, which was, fortunately, a Friday this year, allowing for parties and other celebrations to take place on the actual holiday. My dog, Bear, who sleeps downstairs in the corner of our dining room, woke me up at 4 a.m. when it was still completely dark outside. He was barking at something outside, so I yelled across the house, "Shut up, Bear," and my mom followed suit. Bear eventually stopped barking, but I had no idea what he had been barking at. After that, I fell back asleep, and about 2 hours later, I woke up to my alarm. I started getting ready for school as my dad was leaving for work. As he stepped out onto the front deck, he came back inside furious and said, "Damn it, Zach, clean up after your dog." He thought I had let our dog poop in the front of the house, but I assured him that I had not. He was in a rush and went without any further argument. Then it was my turn to leave for school, and as I did, I caught a whiff of something somewhat unpleasant. I now understood what my dad was talking about. I didn't see any dog poop anywhere, but later, when I returned home around 2, I was still aware of the smell. I didn't know what it was, but it was seriously beginning to stink. My parents were both at work, and they wanted me to hand out candy when trick-or-treaters began to arrive. They didn't arrive until between 4 and 5, and as soon as I opened the door to the first few trick-or-treaters, I could smell an increasingly foul odor. The children and their parents were all commenting on it, so it was obvious that they could smell it too. I learned when to expect the doorbell to ring because I would hear groups of people complaining about how awful it smelled. At one point, I saw Mike and Donna standing in front of their house, and I went outside to ask them if they smelled that too. But that wasn't really a question because it was obvious that it got worse on their property. But there wasn't any dog crap or anything visible that could explain the horrible smell. And this is where things started to get wild. The smell was coming from one of the couple's fake body bag decorations. But it appeared that it wasn't a decoration. The couple had several of the fake body bags leaning against things like the mailbox in their front tree. But there was one just lying flat on the ground. When Donna asked, Mike denied placing it there, but the smell emanating from this bag was intolerable. When Mike rushed to get a knife to cut the bag open, what we saw inside sickened me. He pulled the top of the bag off, showing the rotting face of a real corpse inside. We all covered our mouths in horror, wanting to vomit, and of course, there were parents and children watching to see what was happening. It turned into a tremendous commotion. When I phoned the police, their entire front yard turned into a crime scene with people. I told the police that my dog Bear was barking last night at around 4 a.m., and that he may have been barking at whoever placed the body there, as people gathered from all over to watch, even though the police kept ordering everyone to clear out before the body was carried away. A week later, Mike informed my father that the body was that of a local man in his 30s who had committed suicide. It remains a mystery who dropped off the body. Mike and Donna are quite likable people, so we all assume that whoever did it merely saw them as some rich, snooty household that goes overboard with the decorations for attention. Obviously, there are some sick people out there. Think that was sick? Think again. This next video answers the question, how sick can people actually get?